So this is just pretty much an overview presentation for you at this point. I think we've covered just about everything in this module, but these are just some tools for achieving water quality standards. My general disclaimer. So some of the guiding principles that we've talked about so far this week, water quality standards should really guide the process of restoration for a water body. They need not be the same for every water body, and standards shouldn't be a barrier to achieving incremental water quality improvement. You'll remember this water quality standards schematic showing the three core components of water quality standards on the left, and then one way to implement standards on the right-hand side. That's through NPDES permit limits. And so there's a variety of tools to help meet water quality standards. So we'll talk about some that are on the water quality standards side, so they're water quality standards tools, base tools, and then from the implementation side, some tools from there as well. Okay, so variances, I think we just talked about this for a lot, so I'm not going to go into any more detail, but you know that variances are water quality standards. So they are on the water quality standards side of the diagram here and are a time-limited designated use and criterion. So site-specific criteria you talked about you heard about on Tuesday. They're really a tool to tailor standards to local conditions or to key species. And they're best used when you have additional scientific information that more accurately expresses a level or a criterion for a water quality parameter to best protect the designated use. So these could either be more or less stringent than the basic underlying criterion. A mixing zone, I believe you talked about these yesterday. So this is a tool on the implementation side. So a mixing zone is a limited area of water where initial dilution of the discharge takes place and where that certain numeric water quality criteria can be exceeded. The rationale is that sometimes organisms can be exposed to pollutant concentrations above a criterion for a short duration without interfering with the designated use of a water body as a whole. And then on the water quality standards side, states could choose to have a mixing zone policy. This would be similar to a variance policy in that they're optional, but if a state does choose to have a mixing zone policy, that would be a water quality standard that would be submitted to EPA for review and approval or disapproval. So again, on the implementation side would be a permit compliance schedule. I know you heard about this Wednesday, and I also touched on them a little bit more today in the variance presentation. But they're a tool that allows additional time to take a series of actions to meet a NPDES WQBL. They're if a permittee cannot immediately comply with the WQBL immediately, but they then have a series of enforceable actions to meet that limit as soon as possible. You'll see here on the water quality standards side, states are required to have a permit compliance schedule authorizing provision in place before they're able to use a permit compliance schedule as a tool. That's one thing to keep in mind. So a TMDL, a tool to calculate the needed source reductions for point sources and non-point sources to meet water quality standards. It's really a calculation of the amount of a pollutant, maximum amount of a pollutant that a water body can receive and still meet water quality standards. And they allocate that amount to point sources and non-point sources. So it's called waste load allocations for point sources and load allocations for non-point sources. And that would be a tool on the implementation side for an impaired water body. So this is something we haven't talked about so far today, and I'm not an attorney, so this is about the extent that I'm going to say about it. So there's also enforcement tools on the implementation side. These are requirements outside of water quality standards to take specific action, and so there's various enforcement tools to support the implementation of permit limits and the underlying water quality standards. A couple of examples are administrative orders and civil judicial consent decrees. And they could contain enforceable corrective actions or deadlines to return a permittee to compliance with their limits. So different ways to distinguish the tools. You could just think about, is the tool a water quality standard or not? Does the tool allow for additional time to meet water quality standards, or does it change something so the water quality standards can be met immediately? Another consideration would be, does the tool apply to a discharge or a water body? And would it be appropriate in situations if you have more or less certainty or about the time that's needed to comply with the water quality standards, or to meet the water quality standards? So that was just a very quick overview. I'm going to leave this summary slide up as a helpful cheat sheet for your bingo scenarios.